The moment Ryan Carter stood up in that Texas courthouse and said, "I'll take her case," every attorney in the room knew they were watching career suicide. Here was a single father in carpenter's boots, courthouse dust still on his shirt, volunteering to defend a billionaire CEO against the most brutal corporate legal machine in America. The media would call it delusional. The corporation's lawyers actually laughed out loud. But what nobody in that courtroom knew was that the quiet janitor fixing their broken furniture used to be the kind of lawyer who never lost. And he was about to remember exactly who he used to be. If you want to see how a forgotten single dad took on the impossible and won, stay with me until the end of this story. And hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The courthouse on Lavaca Street in downtown Austin had seen plenty of drama over the years, but nothing quite prepared the building for what was about to unfold on a humid Tuesday morning in late September. Ryan Carter was 32 years old, though some days he felt twice that. He'd been awake since 4:30, the same as every morning, making breakfast for his 9-year-old daughter Claire before her school bus arrived. Scrambled eggs, slightly burned. Toast, barely saved from the smoke detector. Orange juice in her favorite purple cup with the chipped rim they kept meaning to replace but never did. The kitchen in their small rental house always smelled like coffee he made too strong and forgot to drink. "Dad, your shirt's inside out," Claire had said that morning, backpack already on, standing by the door with the patience of someone who'd learned to work around her father's chaos. Ryan had looked down at himself, laughed, and fixed it. "What would I do without you? Probably starve and wear mismatched socks forever. I already wear mismatched socks. I know. That's why I'm worried." By 6:15, Claire was on the bus and Ryan was in his truck, a 2003 Ford with a passenger door that didn't lock and an air conditioner that worked maybe half the time. He drove the 20 minutes to the Travis County Courthouse, parked in the staff lot behind the building, and clocked in at 6:45, same as always. His official title was Facilities Maintenance Technician, which was a fancy way of saying he fixed things and cleaned things and kept the building running. Broken chairs, stuck windows, leaking sinks, flickering lights. Whatever needed doing, Ryan did it. He'd been working at the courthouse for almost 3 years now. Before that, he'd done construction, cabinetry, furniture repair, anything that paid enough to keep food on the table and Claire in a decent school district. Nobody at the courthouse knew Ryan used to be a lawyer. He'd never mentioned it, and nobody had ever asked. When people looked at Ryan Carter, they saw a guy in work boots and a tool belt, maybe a little too skinny, maybe a little too quiet, but reliable and good with his hands. That was enough. Except this morning was different. This morning, Courtroom 6 was hosting the preliminary hearing for Bennett Water Technologies versus Garrison Global Industries, one of the biggest corporate lawsuits filed in Texas in the last 5 years. Ryan had heard people talking about it for weeks. Garrison Global, a massive multinational corporation worth something like $40 billion, was suing a much smaller company for alleged patent infringement and theft of trade secrets. The CEO of the smaller company, some 30-year-old woman who'd supposedly built a revolutionary water purification system, was facing financial ruin if she lost. The lawsuit was asking for $300 million in damages. Ryan didn't pay much attention to corporate drama. He had enough drama trying to figure out how to help Claire with her math homework and remember to buy groceries before the store closed. But Courtroom 6 had a problem. The witness stand, the wooden platform where witnesses sat during testimony, had a wobbly leg. It had been wobbly for months, and the court administrator had been after Ryan to fix it before the big case started. He'd been meaning to get to it, but there was always something more urgent: a broken bathroom stall, a busted door hinge, a fluorescent light that kept buzzing during testimony and driving the judges insane. So Tuesday morning, Ryan finally made his way to Courtroom 6 with his toolbox, figuring he'd tighten the bolts on the witness stand before the hearing started at 9. When he walked in, the courtroom was already filling up. Reporters lined the back rows, cameras ready, notebooks open. Attorneys in expensive suits clustered near the front, talking in low voices, checking their phones. A few courthouse regulars, retirees who showed up to watch trials like other people watched soap operas, had claimed their favorite seats in the gallery. The bailiff was setting up the judge's bench. The court reporter was testing her machine, and sitting alone at the defense table was a young woman who looked like she was barely holding herself together. Ryan recognized her from the news coverage. Sophia Bennett, 30 years old, CEO and founder of Bennett Water Technologies. In every photo Ryan had seen, she looked polished, confident, composed, the kind of person who belonged on magazine covers. Smartly dressed, expressive eyes, the aura of someone who'd built something important and knew it. But right now, sitting in that courtroom, she looked terrified. She wore a navy blazer and a white blouse, her dark hair pulled back, and she kept glancing toward the door like she was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her, and Ryan could see from across the room that her knuckles were white. The prosecution table, by contrast, was a show of force. 4 attorneys in tailored suits, all of them older, all of them radiating the kind of confidence that came from unlimited resources and a track record of crushing opponents. Leading them was a man Ryan vaguely recognized from news coverage, Harold Pembroke, one of the top corporate litigators in the country. 60-something, silver-haired, with the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled at anything that wasn't billable. Ryan set his toolbox down quietly near the witness stand and got to work. He knelt down, pulled out a wrench, and started tightening the bolts on the wobbly leg. The courtroom continued to fill around him. Nobody paid him any attention. He was part of the furniture. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. Everyone stood as Judge Patricia Morales entered from her chambers, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a reputation for running a tight courtroom and zero tolerance for nonsense. Judge Morales took her seat. "You may be seated." The room settled. Ryan stayed kneeling by the witness stand, finishing the last bolt. He figured he'd slip out as soon as he was done. Judge Morales looked over the courtroom, her gaze moving from the prosecution table to the defense table, where Sophia Bennett sat alone. "Ms. Bennett," the judge said, her voice neutral but edged with something that might have been concern. "Where is your legal representation?" Sophia stood, and Ryan could hear the slight tremor in her voice even from where he was kneeling. "Your Honor, my attorney. Mr. Davison was supposed to be here. I've been trying to reach him all morning, but he's not here." "No, Your Honor, he's not." A ripple of whispers moved through the gallery. Ryan glanced up from his toolbox, watching. Judge Morales frowned. "Ms. Bennett, this is a preliminary hearing for a major civil lawsuit. You cannot proceed without legal representation." "I understand, Your Honor. I don't know where he is. He was supposed to meet me here at 8:30. But what he assets." Harold Pembroke rose from the prosecution table, smooth and unhurried. "Your Honor, if I may, the defense's disorganization should not delay these proceedings. Garrison Global has prepared extensively for this hearing, and we respectfully request that Mr. Pembroke, I'm well aware of your preparations." Judge Morales cut him off with a look that could freeze water. "But I will not allow this case to proceed without proper representation for the defendant. Ms. Bennett, do you have any way to contact alternative counsel?" Sophia's voice was quiet. Not on this short notice, Your Honor. Mr. Davison was my only option." Mas. That wasn't quite true, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The truth was that Sophia Bennett had already been turned down by half a dozen law firms before Davison had agreed to take her case. Garrison Global had deep pockets and a reputation for destroying anyone who opposed them. Most attorneys wanted nothing to do with a case this ugly, especially when the defendant was a small company going up against a corporate giant with unlimited resources. Davison had taken the case, but only barely. He'd been charging Sophia a reduced rate, still more than she could really afford, and he'd made it clear from the start that he didn't think they could win. He'd been pushing Sophia to settle, to accept Garrison's terms, and walk away with whatever scraps she could salvage. But Sophia had refused. She knew she hadn't stolen anything. Her water purification technology was her own invention, built from years of research and development. She wasn't going to let Garrison Global steamroll her just because they had more money and better lawyers. Except now her lawyer wasn't here, and she was standing alone in a courtroom full of people waiting to watch her lose. Judge Morales sighed. "Ms. Bennett, I'm going to give you until this afternoon to secure representation. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. If you don't have an attorney by then, I'll have no choice but to postpone this hearing indefinitely. And given the circumstances, she has representation." The voice came from the side of the courtroom near the witness stand. Everyone turned. Ryan Carter was standing up, toolbox in one hand, wrench in the other. He set the wrench down carefully on top of the toolbox, wiped his hands on his jeans, and looked directly at Judge Morales. "I'll take her case." For a moment, the courtroom was completely silent. Then someone in the gallery laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, quickly stifled, but it broke the spell. Whispers erupted. Reporters leaned forward. The attorneys at the prosecution table exchanged glances, smirking. Judge Morales stared at Ryan like he'd just announced he was the King of England. "Excuse me?" Ryan cleared his throat. "I said I'll represent Ms. Bennett, if she'll have me." "And you are?" "Ryan Carter, Your Honor." "Mr. Carter, are you an attorney?" "I am. Texas Bar. Admitted 8 years ago. Member in good standing." Judge Morales' expression shifted from confusion to something closer to disbelief. "You're a licensed attorney?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you work here as a facilities maintenance?" Another wave of whispers. Harold Pembroke stood again, and this time there was no hiding the condescension in his voice. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The defense cannot be represented by a janitor." Ryan looked at Pembroke for the first time. "I'm not a janitor. I'm a carpenter who also happens to be a licensed attorney. And unless Texas changed the rules when I wasn't looking, Ms. Bennett has the right to choose her own representation." Judge Morales held up a hand, silencing Pembroke before he could respond. She looked at Ryan with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for witnesses caught lying on the stand. "Mr. Carter, when was the last time you practiced law?" 6 years ago, Your Honor." "And why did you stop?" Ryan hesitated. This was the part he didn't talk about. Not with coworkers, not with neighbors, not with anyone except Claire on the rare occasions when she asked about her mother. "Personal reasons, Your Honor. Family circumstances." Judge Morales studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Sophia. "Ms. Bennett, do you wish to accept Mr. Carter as your legal counsel?" Sophia was staring at Ryan like he'd just appeared out of thin air. She looked stunned, suspicious, and maybe, just maybe, like she was considering the possibility that this wasn't the worst idea in the world. I don't even know who you are," she said. Ryan met her eyes. "I know, but right now I'm the only person in this room offering to help you." "Why?" It was a fair question. Ryan didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he did. But it wasn't one he could explain in the middle of a courtroom. The truth was, he'd been listening to people talk about this case for weeks. He'd heard the courthouse staff gossiping about the young CEO who thought she could take on Garrison Global. He'd read a few articles online late at night when Claire was asleep, and he couldn't shut his brain off. And something about the whole situation had gotten under his skin. Sophia Bennett had built something. A real company, a real product, something that mattered. She'd invented a water purification system that could provide clean drinking water to communities that couldn't afford traditional infrastructure. And now a massive corporation was trying to destroy her, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because her success threatened their market dominance. It reminded Ryan of why he'd become a lawyer in the first place. Before everything fell apart, before he'd walked away from the courtroom and convinced himself he'd never come back. "Because I think you're getting screwed," Ryan said simply, "and I don't like watching people get screwed when I can do something about it." Sophia stared at him. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay." Judge Morales raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Bennett, are you certain?" "Ooh?" "No," Sophia said honestly. "But I'm out of options, so yes. I accept Mr. Carter as my attorney." Judge Morales looked like she was reconsidering every decision that had led her to this moment. But she was also a judge who believed in the rule of law, and the law said Sophia Bennett had the right to choose her own representation, even if that representation was a courthouse carpenter who hadn't set foot in a courtroom in 6 years. "Very well," Judge Morales said. "Mr. Carter, I assume you'll need time to review the case materials." "I will, Your Honor." "Then we'll reconvene in 1 week. That gives you 7 days to get up to speed. I suggest you use them wisely." She looked at both Ryan and Sophia with an expression that clearly communicated she thought they were both out of their minds. "Court is adjourned." Matin midi. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters swarmed toward Ryan and Sophia, shouting questions. Camera flashes went off. Harold Pembroke was already on his phone, probably calling his client to tell them the defense had just imploded in the most spectacular way possible. Ryan grabbed his toolbox and made his way towards Sophia, who was still standing at the defense table, looking shell-shocked. "We should talk," Ryan said. "Somewhere that's not here, say—" Sophia nodded mutely. She gathered her papers, stuffed them into her briefcase, and followed Ryan out of the courtroom, through the back hallway, past the crowd of reporters shouting questions they didn't answer. They ended up in a small conference room on the third floor, one of the windowless spaces the courthouse used for attorney-client meetings. Ryan closed the door behind them, shutting out the noise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sophia said very quietly, "What the hell just happened?" Ryan set his toolbox down and leaned against the wall. "I think I just volunteered to represent you in a $300 million lawsuit." "Why?" "Honestly, I'm not sure yet." Sophia laughed, but it came out shaky, almost hysterical. "This is insane. You're insane. I'm insane for saying yes." "Probably. I don't know anything about you. You could be terrible at this." "I could be," Ryan admitted, "but I used to be pretty good. Used to be. 6 years ago, I worked at a mid-sized firm in Dallas, corporate litigation mostly. I won more cases than I lost. Not all of them, but most." "And then you just stopped? Became a carpenter?" Ryan looked at her. "My wife died. Car accident. Claire was 3 years old. I had a choice. Keep working 60-hour weeks and barely see my daughter, or walk away and actually be a parent. So I walked away." Sophia's expression softened. "I'm sorry. It was the right choice. Still is, but that doesn't mean I forgot how to do this." "Do you really think we can win?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. He thought about the case, what little he knew of it from courthouse gossip and news coverage. He thought about Garrison Global, their army of lawyers, their endless resources. He thought about the odds, which were not good. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know you didn't steal anything, and I know Garrison Global is trying to bury you because they're scared of what you've built. That's worth fighting for." Sophia studied him, this strange man who'd just upended her entire world. Then she held out her hand. "Okay, let's fight." Ryan shook her hand. Her grip was firm, steady. Ryan shook her. Stronger than he'd expected. "I'm going to need everything," Ryan said. "Every document, every email, every piece of research. Your entire case file. Can you get that to me today?" "I can have it to you in 2 hours." "Good. I'll also need access to your lab, your facility, anywhere you develop this technology. And I'll need to talk to your team, engineers, scientists, anyone who worked on the project." "Done." "One more thing," Ryan said. "Do you have a paralegal? Someone who can help with research and document review?" Sophia hesitated. "I had one. Emily Ross. She worked for Davison, but she believed in this case more than he did, I think. I think she might be willing to help if we ask." "Then let's ask." They spent the next hour in that conference room, mapping out a plan. Sophia called Emily, who answered on the second ring, and after a shocked silence, agreed to meet them that afternoon. Ryan made a list of everything he needed to review, everything he needed to learn, everything he needed to understand about water purification technology and patent law and the history of Garrison Global's legal tactics. It was overwhelming. It was impossible. But for the first time in 6 years, Ryan felt something he'd almost forgotten, the sharp, electric thrill of a fight worth having. By the time they left the courthouse, the story was already spreading. Social media lit up with clips from the courtroom, headlines screaming about the janitor-turned-lawyer taking on a corporate giant. The television news picked it up by noon. By evening, it was trending nationally. Most of the coverage was mocking. Commentators called it a publicity stunt. Legal analysts said Sophia Bennett had just guaranteed her own defeat. One particularly cruel headline read, "Billionaire CEO's Last Hope, a single dad in work boots." Ryan saw the headlines on his phone while he waited in the school pickup line that afternoon. He scrolled through them, jaw tight, and then turned off his phone and focused on the one thing that mattered. Claire came running out of the building, backpack bouncing, ponytail swinging. She climbed into the truck, grinning. "Hey, Dad. How was work?" Ryan looked at his daughter, bright-eyed, trusting, completely unaware that her father had just made a decision that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Interesting," he said. "Really interesting." "Oui. Wo opam i." That night, After dinner and homework, and the bedtime routine that had become muscle memory, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and the first batch of case files Sophia had sent over. Thousands of pages. Patent filings. Technical schematics. Email chains. Depositions. Corporate memos. The sheer volume was staggering. Ryan started reading. He read until midnight, then 1, then 2. He made notes, highlighted passages, cross-referenced documents. His brain, dormant for so long, began to wake up. Legal patterns emerged. Inconsistencies appeared. Questions formed. By 3 in the morning, Ryan had the beginning of a theory. Garrison Global's lawsuit claimed Sophia had stolen proprietary technology. But the more Ryan read, the more he realized something didn't add up. The patents Garrison was citing had been filed after Sophia's research was already public. Her peer-reviewed papers, published in scientific journals, predated Garrison's so-called innovations by months, sometimes years, which meant either Sophia had somehow traveled back in time to steal technology that didn't exist yet, or Garrison Global was lying. Ryan kept reading. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. By Thursday, Emily Ross had officially joined the team. She was 26, sharp as hell, and angry in the way people get when they've watched something unjust happen and decided they're not going to stand for it anymore. She'd quit Davison's firm the same day he abandoned Sophia, and she showed up at Ryan's house with 3 boxes of documents and a laptop covered in legal aid stickers. "I don't know if we can win this," Emily said, setting the boxes down in Ryan's living room. "But I know we can make them bleed." Ryan liked her immediately. They set up a makeshift war room in Ryan's house. The dining table disappeared under stacks of paper. Whiteboards appeared on the walls, covered in timelines and evidence chains. Claire, delighted by the chaos, appointed herself official snack coordinator and spent her evenings making sandwiches and delivering juice boxes to the legal team. Sophia came by every evening after work, usually around 7, and stayed until past midnight. She walked Ryan and Emily through the technical details of her water purification system, how it worked, why it mattered, how she'd developed it. She was patient, thorough, and passionate in a way that made Ryan understand why she'd refused to settle. This wasn't just a business to her, it was a mission. "There are 2 billion people in the world without access to clean drinking water," Sophia said one night, standing in front of the whiteboard, marker in hand. 2 billion. Most of them are in communities that can't afford traditional infrastructure. They need something cheaper, something portable, something that works without electricity or complex supply chains. She pointed to a diagram on the board, a schematic of her purification system. "This works. It's been tested in 12 countries. It costs a fraction of what traditional systems cost, and it's effective against bacteria, viruses, parasites, everything. It saves lives. And Garrison Global wants to destroy it because if this technology succeeds, their overpriced, overcomplicated systems become obsolete." Ryan studied the diagram. "So they're not actually claiming you stole from them. They're trying to stop you from competing with them." "Exactly. Then we need to prove it." By Sunday night, Ryan had drafted a preliminary defense strategy. It was rough, incomplete, full of gaps they'd need to fill. But it was a start. The core argument was simple. Sophia Bennett hadn't stolen anything because the technology Garrison Global claimed as their own had never actually belonged to them in the first place. Garrison had studied Sophia's published research, recognized the threat it posed to their business, and filed patents on slight variations of her work. Then they'd sued her for infringement, hoping to bankrupt her through legal costs before the case ever got to trial. It was brilliant, in a ruthless kind of way. Most defendants would settle rather than fight. Most couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle against a corporation with unlimited resources. But Sophia wasn't most defendants, and now she had a lawyer who was too stubborn or too stupid to walk away. Monday morning, Ryan dropped Claire at school, drove to the courthouse, and submitted their initial response to the lawsuit. By noon, the media had picked up the story again. By evening, legal commentators were dissecting Ryan's filing on cable news. Most of them were unimpressed. One analyst called it competent but unimaginative. Another said Ryan was out of his depth and sinking fast. Ryan didn't watch. He was too busy reading. Tuesday, Garrison's attorneys filed a motion to dismiss Ryan as Sophia's counsel, arguing he lacked the experience and expertise to adequately represent her in a case of this complexity. Judge Morales denied the motion, but not before scheduling a hearing to ensure Ryan understood what he was getting into. Wednesday, Ryan met with his first expert witness, a patent attorney who'd reviewed Sophia's work and agreed to testify that her technology was genuinely original. The meeting went well, right up until the expert asked about Ryan's fee structure, and Ryan admitted he wasn't charging Sophia anything. "You're doing this for free? She can't afford to pay me. So you're working a full-time job, raising a kid alone, and taking on a major lawsuit pro bono." When you say it like that, it sounds stupid. That's because it is stupid. Ryan didn't disagree. By Thursday, the case had taken over his entire life. He worked his courthouse shift from 7 to 3, picked up Claire from school, helped her with homework, made dinner, put her to bed, and then worked on the case until 2 or 3 in the morning. Sleep became theoretical. Coffee became a food group. Emily handled the bulk of the document review, combing through thousands of pages of evidence, looking for inconsistencies, contradictions, anything they could use. Sophia coordinated with her engineers, gathering technical data, preparing exhibits, assembling the evidence they'd need to prove her innocence. And Ryan remembered what it felt like to be a lawyer. It wasn't just the legal analysis or the courtroom strategy. It was the belief that what they were doing mattered, that standing up to power, even when the odds were impossible, was worth the cost. He'd forgotten that. For 6 years, he'd told himself he'd made the right choice, walking away from law to focus on being a father. And he had made the right choice. Claire needed him, and he'd been there for her in ways he never could have been if he'd stayed in the legal world. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way to do both. Friday afternoon, Ryan got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Carter? Yes?" "This is Harold Pembroke. I represent Garrison Global Industries." Ryan stopped walking. He was in the courthouse hallway, on his way to fix a broken door hinge. "I know who you are. I'd like to discuss a settlement. Ms. Bennett's not interested in settling. Perhaps you should reconsider. My client is prepared to offer very generous terms. Ms. Bennett could walk away from this with her company intact and enough capital to continue her work. No admission of guilt, no further legal action. Clean break. And in exchange, she licenses her technology to Garrison Global exclusively. We handle distribution and development going forward." Though Ryan laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "So she hands over everything she built, and Garrison controls who gets access to it and at what price. It's a fair offer. It's a cage. Mr. Carter, let me be clear. If this case goes to trial, we will win. My client has the resources, the expertise, and the evidence to bury Ms. Bennett. You are a carpenter pretending to be a lawyer, and you are going to destroy your client's last chance at survival because of your own ego." Ryan felt anger flare, hot and sharp, but he kept his voice steady. "Tell your client we'll see them in court." He hung up. That night, Ryan told Sophia and Emily about the call. Sophia wasn't surprised. "They've been trying to get me to settle from the beginning," she said. "That's the whole point of this lawsuit. They don't actually want to go to trial. They just want to pressure me into giving up." "Then we don't give up," Emily said. Ryan nodded. "Agreed." But as the week came to a close, the reality of what they'd taken on began to sink in. 7 days until the hearing. 7 days to build a defense against one of the most powerful legal teams in the country. 7 days to prepare for a battle they had almost no chance of winning. Ryan sat at his kitchen table late Friday night, surrounded by documents, exhausted beyond measure, and asked himself the question he'd been avoiding all week. What the hell had he just done? His phone buzzed, a text from Claire, who was supposed to be asleep upstairs. "Dad, are you okay?" Ryan smiled despite everything. "Yeah, kiddo, just working. Go to sleep. You're doing something important." "Right?" "I think so." "Then it's okay if you're tired. Important things are supposed to be hard." Ryan stared at the message for a long time. Then he went back to work. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., which gave Ryan exactly 72 hours to finalize their strategy. He spent most of Saturday in his makeshift war room, cross-referencing patent filings with Sophia's published research papers, building a timeline that would prove Garrison Global had been watching her work for years. Emily showed up at 8 in the morning with coffee and a folder full of new discoveries. "I found something," she said, dropping the folder on the table. Internal Garrison emails from 3 years ago. Someone in their R&D department was tracking Sophia's publications. They even attended one of her conference presentations. Ryan flipped through the emails, his pulse quickening. They knew about her technology before they filed their patents. Not just knew, they studied it. There's a memo here where their chief engineer specifically references her filtration method and suggests ways to modify it just enough to avoid obvious plagiarism. That's not innovation. That's theft with extra steps. Well, exactly. Emily leaned against the table, arms crossed. But here's the problem. These emails were part of Davison's discovery requests, and Garrison claims they turned everything over. If we argue they didn't, we have to prove it. And if we can't, then it looks like we're making excuses. Ryan rubbed his eyes. He'd slept maybe 3 hours. We need someone from inside Garrison who'll talk. Good luck with that. Anyone who testifies against them will never work in the industry again. Oui, boss c'est qu'est. Someone with nothing to lose, then. Emily raised an eyebrow. You know anyone like that? Not yet, but we have 3 days to find them. Sophia arrived around noon, carrying a laptop and a bag of takeout. She set the food down and immediately zeroed in on the timeline Ryan had taped to the wall. That's it, she said, pointing to a cluster of dates. June 2021. That's when I published my paper on ceramic membrane filtration. And 3 months later, Garrison filed a patent on advanced ceramic filtration systems for portable water purification. Ryan finished. Almost identical methodology, just different enough to claim it's original. Sophia's jaw tightened. They stole my work and then sued me for using it. That's what we're going to prove. They spent the afternoon rehearsing. Ryan needed Sophia ready to testify, and that meant preparing her for the kind of aggressive cross-examination Pembroke would throw at her. Emily played the role of hostile attorney, firing questions designed to rattle and confuse. Ms. Bennett, isn't it true that you were struggling financially when you started this company? Yes, and isn't it true that stealing established technology would have been much faster than developing your own? I didn't steal anything. That's not what I asked. Sophia faltered. Ryan held up a hand. Stop. Sophia, you can't get defensive. That's what they want. Answer the question they actually asked, nothing more. Sophia took a breath. Yes, developing original technology takes time. I chose to do it anyway because that's the right way to build something that matters. Better, Ryan said. But lose the moral superiority. Juries don't like being lectured. Just state facts. They ran through it again and again. By the time the sun set, Sophia's answers were sharper, more controlled. She still looked exhausted, but there was steel in her voice now. Claire wandered downstairs around 7, drawn by the smell of Chinese takeout. She surveyed the chaos, papers everywhere, whiteboards covered in legal jargon, 3 stressed adults who looked like they hadn't slept in days, and announced, "This looks like a disaster." "It is a disaster," Emily said cheerfully. "Want some lo mein?" Claire helped herself to a plate and sat cross-legged on the floor, watching them work. After a while, she looked up at Ryan. "Dad, are you going to win?" Ryan paused, marker in hand. "I don't know, kiddo. But you're trying really hard." "Yeah, I am." "Then that's good enough." Sophia watched the exchange with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. Later, when Claire had gone back upstairs and Emily was deep in document review, Sophia pulled Ryan aside. "She's great," Sophia said quietly. "She is." "You're really doing this alone? No family help? No..." "Just me and Claire. Has been for 6 years." Ryan didn't elaborate. He'd learned that most people didn't know what to say when you mentioned being widowed young, so he just didn't mention it unless necessary. Sophia nodded slowly. "I grew up with a single mom. She worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I remember watching her come home exhausted every night and still make time to help me with homework. Still show up to every school event. I don't know how she did it. You do it because you don't have a choice, and because they're worth it." "Yeah." Sophia smiled faintly. "They are." Sunday morning brought a new problem. Ryan was at the kitchen table, reviewing deposition transcripts, when his phone rang. Unknown number again. "Ryan Carter." "Mr. Carter, This is Linda Vasquez. I'm a reporter with the Austin Chronicle. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about the Bennett case. Ryan sighed. I'm not doing interviews. I understand. But there's a story circulating that you were actually disbarred 6 years ago and have been lying about your credentials. I wanted to give you a chance to respond before we publish. Ryan's blood went cold. That's completely false. So you're saying you're currently a member in good standing with the Texas Bar? Yes. You can verify that yourself. It's public record. We did verify it, but the question people are asking is why a successful attorney would suddenly become a carpenter. It seems suspicious. My personal life isn't relevant to this case. With respect, Mr. Carter, you made it relevant when you volunteered to represent Miss Bennett. People want to know who you are. Ryan closed his eyes. My wife died, and I had a 3-year-old daughter. I chose to be a father instead of a lawyer. That's the whole story. There was a pause. When Vasquez spoke again, her voice was softer. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you for clarifying. She hung up. Ryan sat there for a moment, staring at his phone. Emily appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. You okay? They're digging into my background, trying to discredit me before we even get to court. Classic Pembroke move. He wants the narrative to be about you, not about the case. It's working. Half the headlines are calling me a joke. The other half are calling you a hero, and more importantly, Judge Morales hasn't kicked you off the case. Emily sat down across from him. Look, Pembroke's scared. He wouldn't be playing dirty if he thought you were harmless. Or he's just being thorough. No, trust me. I worked for corporate attorneys like him. They don't waste energy destroying people who don't threaten them. The fact that he's coming after you means you're doing something right. Ryan wanted to believe that. But doubt was easier to find than confidence these days. By Sunday evening, they'd finalized their presentation for the preliminary hearing. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid. They had evidence, they had timelines, they had expert testimony lined up. Whether it would be enough against Garrison's machine of corporate lawyers remained to be seen. Ryan sent Emily and Sophia home around 10, promising he'd get some sleep. He didn't. Instead, he sat at the table reviewing his notes one more time, rehearsing his opening statement, trying to anticipate every possible curveball Pembroke might throw. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. Thank you for all of this. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm grateful. Ryan stared at the message. Then he typed back. We're going to fight like hell. That's what matters. I believe you. Ryan wished he believed himself. Monday morning arrived too fast. Ryan woke up at 5 after maybe 2 hours of sleep, showered, and put on the only suit he still owned, a charcoal gray one he hadn't worn since Claire's kindergarten graduation. It was a little loose now. He'd lost weight over the past 6 years without really noticing. Claire was already awake when he came downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, eating cereal. You look fancy, she said. I look tired. That too. She studied him seriously. Are you nervous? Terrified. You're going to be great, Dad. Ryan bent down and kissed the top of her head. Love you, kiddo. Love you too. Kick their butts. Ryan's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was watching Claire for the day. She arrived at 6:30, same as always, and shooed Ryan out the door with a firm, go win. The courthouse was packed by the time Ryan arrived at 8. News vans lined the street. Reporters crowded the steps. Security had set up barriers to manage the crowd trying to get into the courtroom. Ryan slipped in through the employee entrance, avoiding the cameras. Emily met him in the hallway outside courtroom 6, looking sharp in a black blazer, her laptop bag over her shoulder. Sophia's already inside, Emily said. She looks like she's about to throw up. That makes 2 of us. They entered the courtroom together. Sophia was at the defense table, hands folded, staring straight ahead. She wore a gray suit, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked professional, composed, and absolutely petrified. Ryan set his briefcase down and took the seat beside her. Ready? He asked quietly. No. You? Not even a little. Sophia laughed, a shaky, desperate sound. Good. At least we're honest. The prosecution table was an intimidating sight. Harold Pembroke sat in the center, flanked by 3 associates. Their side of the table was organized with military precision. Stacks of binders, Tablets queued up, exhibits marked and ready. They looked like they were preparing to invade a small country. Ryan's side of the table had 2 legal pads, a laptop, and a folder of documents Emily had printed at Kinko's the night before. The gallery filled quickly. Reporters claimed the back rows. Courthouse regulars settled into their seats. Ryan spotted a few familiar faces from his courthouse job: maintenance workers, clerks, security guards, all watching with expressions that ranged from curious to concerned. At 9 o'clock sharp, the bailiff called, "All rise." Judge Morales entered, took her seat, Misatsin, and surveyed the courtroom with the expression of someone who knew this was going to be a long day. "You may be seated. We're here for the preliminary hearing in Bennett Water Technologies versus Garrison Global Industries. Mr. Pembroke, you may proceed with your opening statement." Pembroke rose smoothly, buttoned his suit jacket, and addressed the court like he was born to it. "Your Honor, this case is about theft, plain and simple. The defendant, Ms. Sophia Bennett, built her company by stealing intellectual property that rightfully belongs to Garrison Global Industries. She copied our patented technology, rebranded it as her own innovation, and profited from our years of research and development. We will prove, through documentation, expert testimony, and forensic analysis, that Ms. Bennett's water purification system is not original, but rather a direct derivative of Garrison's proprietary work. We ask the court to hold her accountable and award damages that reflect the severity of her actions. Thank you." He sat down. The whole statement had taken maybe 90 seconds, and it was devastating in its simplicity. Theft. Plain and simple. Judge Morales looked at Ryan. "Mr. Carter, your opening statement." Ryan stood. His legs felt unsteady. The courtroom seemed enormous suddenly, every eye on him, every camera focused. He forced himself to walk to the podium, to look at the judge, to speak clearly. "Your Honor, my client didn't steal anything. She invented something. She spent years developing a water purification system that works better, costs less, and saves lives. Garrison Global didn't sue her because she stole from them. They sued her because she threatened their business. The evidence will show that Miss Bennett published her research publicly before Garrison filed their patents. It will show that Garrison studied her work, copied her methods, and then weaponized the legal system to crush a competitor they couldn't beat through innovation. This isn't about theft. It's about a corporation trying to destroy someone who dared to do something better than they could." Ryan returned to his seat. His heart was hammering. The statement hadn't been eloquent or polished, but it was honest. That had to count for something. Judge Morales made a note. "Mr. Pembroke, call your first witness." The plaintiff calls Dr. Martin Ashford. A man in his 60s entered the courtroom, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from decades of being paid to have opinions. He was sworn in and took the witness stand. Pembroke approached. "Dr. Ashford, please state your credentials for the court." "I have a PhD in chemical engineering from MIT. I've worked in water purification technology for 38 years and hold 17 patents in the field. I currently serve as Chief Technology Officer for Garrison Global's Water Division." "And have you reviewed Ms. Bennett's water purification system?" "I have." "What did you find?" Ashford looked directly at the jury box, even though this was just a preliminary hearing, playing to an audience that wasn't there yet. "Ms. Bennett's system uses a ceramic membrane filtration process that is virtually identical to technology Garrison Global developed and patented in 2021. The core methodology, the materials used, even the structural design, all of it mirrors our proprietary work. And in your expert opinion, could Ms. Bennett have developed this independently?" "It's theoretically possible, but highly unlikely. The specific combination of elements she uses is too similar to our patents to be coincidental." "Thank you, Dr. Ashford. No further questions." Judge Morales looked at Ryan. "Cross-examination?" Ryan stood, grabbed his notes, and approached the witness stand. His first cross-examination in 6 years. His mouth was dry. "Dr. Ashford, you said Garrison filed their patents in 2021. That's correct. And you reviewed Ms. Bennett's published research papers as part of your analysis?" "I did." "Can you tell the court when those papers were published?" Ashford shifted slightly. "I believe the earliest was in 2020. You believe or you know? Some. I know. June 2020. Ryan pulled out a document and handed it to the bailiff to give to Ashford. This is Ms. Bennett's paper titled Ceramic Membrane Filtration for Decentralized Water Purification, published in the Journal of Environmental Engineering in June 2020. Can you confirm that's the paper you reviewed? Ashford glanced at it. Yes, on that. Ashford glanced at. And this paper describes the exact methodology you claim Ms. Bennett stole from Garrison? It describes a similar methodology. Not similar, identical. The ceramic composition, the pore size, the flow rate, everything, correct? Ashford hesitated. The paper discusses those elements, yes. So, Ms. Bennett published this methodology publicly in a peer-reviewed journal 9 months before Garrison filed their patent? That's what the dates suggest. That's what the dates. And peer-reviewed means other scientists read and verified her work before publication? Generally, yes. So the scientific community knew about Ms. Bennett's technology before Garrison claimed it as their own? Pembroke stood. Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Carter. Ryan took a breath. Dr. Ashford, if Ms. Bennett's research was public in June 2020 and Garrison didn't file their patent until March 2021, how exactly did she steal from you? Ashford's expression tightened. The patent filing date doesn't reflect when the technology was developed internally. Garrison had been working on this for years before we filed. Do you have documentation proving that? Internal development records are proprietary. So you're asking the court to take your word for it. I'm stating the facts as I know them. Ryan glanced at his notes. Dr. Ashford, did you attend Ms. Bennett's presentation at the International Water Conference in September 2020? Ashford went very still. I may have attended that conference. You may have, or you did. I attended the conference. And did you watch Ms. Bennett's presentation? A pause. I don't recall. Ryan pulled out another document. This is the conference attendance log. Your name is on the registration list for Ms. Bennett's session. Does that refresh your memory? Ashford's face flushed slightly. If the log says I was there, then I was there. And 3 months after watching Ms. Bennett present her technology publicly, Garrison Global filed a patent on the same technology and then sued her for using it. That's a gross mischaracterization. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Garrison watched my client's work, copied it, and then tried to claim ownership. Objection! Pembroke was on his feet. Your Honor, counsel is testifying instead of questioning. Sustained. Mr. Carter, ask questions. Ryan nodded. No further questions. He returned to his seat. Emily leaned over and whispered, That was good. Ryan didn't feel good. He felt like he'd barely scraped the surface. Ashford was one witness. Garrison would have a dozen more, all polished, all prepared, all ready to bury Sophia under mountains of technical jargon and manufactured doubt. Pembroke called his next witness, a patent examiner who testified about the strength of Garrison's patents, then a forensic analyst who claimed to find similarities between Garrison's technology and Sophia's system that couldn't be explained by coincidence. Ryan cross-examined both. He poked holes where he could, established inconsistencies, but he was fighting uphill. Garrison's case was built on layers of expert testimony, all of it designed to make Sophia look like a thief. By noon, Judge Morales called a recess. Ryan, Sophia, and Emily retreated to their conference room. Sophia sank into a chair and put her head in her hands. They're destroying us, she said quietly. They're throwing everything they have at us, Ryan corrected. That's different. It doesn't feel different. Emily set her laptop on the table. We need someone from inside Garrison who'll contradict their story. Without that, it's our word against theirs, and they have more words. Ryan knew she was right. They needed a whistleblower, someone who'd been inside Garrison's R&D department and could testify to what really happened. But finding someone like that in the next few hours was impossible, unless... Ryan pulled out his phone and scrolled through the documents Emily had found, the internal emails from Garrison's engineering team. One name kept appearing in the chain, Marcus Webb, a senior engineer who'd raised concerns about the patent filings. Emily, do we have contact information for Marcus Webb? Emily frowned. The engineer from the emails? Maybe. Why? Because he questioned the patent application. That means he knows something's wrong. He also still works for Garrison. No way he's going to testify against them. Maybe not, but it's worth a shot. Ryan found Webb's email through a LinkedIn search and sent a message during the lunch break. Short, direct, honest. Mr. Webb, my name is Ryan Carter. I'm representing Sophia Bennett. I believe you know the truth about Garrison's patents. If you're willing to talk, please call me. He didn't expect a response, but 20 minutes later his phone rang. This is Marcus Webb. You're the carpenter lawyer, right? That's me. You've got guts, I'll give you that. What do you want? The truth. You raised concerns about those patent filings. You knew they were based on Sophia Bennett's work. There was a long silence. Then Webb said, I can't testify. I've got a family, a mortgage, a career. If I go against Garrison, I'm done in this industry. I understand, but Ms. Bennett's career is already done if Garrison wins. And they're winning because they're lying. I know they're lying. Everyone in the department knows, but that doesn't mean I can do anything about it. Ryan's frustration boiled over. So you're just going to let them destroy someone for doing better work than they could? I'm going to keep my head down and protect my family, same as you would. No, I wouldn't. Ryan's voice was hard. I'd do the right thing, because that's what you teach your kids. That's what matters. Webb was quiet for a long moment. You really think you can win this? I think I can make them bleed, and maybe that's enough. But another pause. Then, I can't testify. But I can point you towards someone who might. Julia Ramos. She used to work for Garrison, left about a year ago. She was in the room when they made the decision to file those patents. If anyone's willing to talk, it's her. Ryan grabbed a pen. How do I reach her? Webb gave him a phone number. Good luck, Mr. Carter. For what it's worth, I hope you win. The call ended. Ryan immediately dialed the number Webb had given him. Julia Ramos answered on the third ring. Hello? Ms. Ramos, my name is Ryan Carter. I'm an attorney representing Sophia Bennett in a lawsuit against Garrison Global. I was told you might be willing to talk about what you witnessed while working there. Who told you that? I can't say. But they seem to think you left Garrison because you disagreed with how they do business. Ramos laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. I left because I couldn't stomach watching them crush people who did better work than they could. Then help me stop them. By testifying? You know what'll happen if I do that? I'll be blacklisted. No one in the industry will hire me. Maybe. Or maybe you'll be the person who stood up and told the truth when it mattered. That's easy to say when it's not your career on the line. Miss Ramos, I walked away from my career 6 years ago. I gave up everything to raise my daughter alone. I understand what it costs to do the hard thing, but I also understand that some fights are worth having. There was a long silence. Then Ramos said, What do you need from me? Ryan's heart leapt. Everything you know about how Garrison filed those patents, dates, meetings, decisions. I need you to testify that they knew about Sophia Bennett's work before they claimed it as their own. I can do that, but I need something from you. Name it. Promise me that if this goes sideways, you'll make sure it was worth it, that Sophia Bennett actually wins. Ryan closed his eyes. I'll fight like hell. That's all I can promise. Then I'm in. When do you need me? Court reconvenes in 45 minutes. Ramos swore softly. You don't ask for much, do you? I'm desperate. Desperate people don't have the luxury of asking politely. Fine, I'll be there. But Carter, you better be as good as people say you used to be. So do I. Ryan hung up and turned to Emily and Sophia, who were staring at him with identical expressions of shock. We have a whistleblower, Ryan said, and she'll be here in half an hour. Sophia looked like she might cry. How did you? Doesn't matter. What matters is we have a shot now. They spent the remaining time prepping as much as they could, but there wasn't much to prep. Julia Ramos would either save them or she wouldn't. Everything hinged on what she said and whether Judge Morales would allow her testimony on such short notice. When court reconvened, Ryan stood immediately. Your Honor, The defense calls Julia Ramos as a witness. Pembroke shot to his feet. Objection. This witness was not on the defense's witness list. Because we only located her an hour ago, Your Honor. Ms. Ramos is a former Garrison Global employee with direct knowledge of the events in question. Her testimony is critical to our defense.
Would I? Judge Morales looked skeptical.
Mr. Carter, you can't just spring surprise witnesses in the middle of a hearing.
Sir.
Your Honor, I understand the court's concern, but Ms. Ramos can provide first-hand testimony about how Garrison Global filed their patents. Without her, we're relying entirely on circumstantial evidence. I'm asking the court to allow her testimony in the interest of justice. Pembroke's voice was sharp. Your Honor, Pembroke's voice, this is highly irregular and prejudicial to the plaintiff. We haven't had time to prepare for this witness.
Neither have we, Ryan shot back. But sometimes the truth doesn't wait for everyone to be prepared.
Judge Morales drummed her fingers on the bench. Then she said, I'll allow it, but Mr. Carter, if this witness turns out to be a waste of the court's time, there will be consequences. Understood, Your Honor. Tom Akipaskis. Julia Ramos entered the courtroom 5 minutes later. She was in her mid-30s, professional but tense, and she looked like she was reconsidering every decision that had led her to this moment. She was sworn in and took the stand. Ryan approached carefully. Ms. Ramos, can you tell the court where you worked until last year? I was a project manager in the Research and Development Division of Garrison Global Industries. And what was your role there? I oversaw technology assessments and patent filings for new products. Were you involved in the patent applications related to water purification technology? I was. Can you describe the process by which those patents were filed? Ramos took a breath. In early 2021, our team became aware of Sophia Bennett's work. She'd published research on ceramic membrane filtration, and it was getting attention in the industry. Our executives saw it as a competitive threat. How did they respond? They instructed us to study her methodology and file patents that would allow us to claim ownership of similar technology. Ryan let that hang in the air. So Garrison Global studied Ms. Bennett's public research and then filed patents based on her work? Yes. And did anyone raise concerns about the ethics of that approach? I did. So did several engineers. We were told that as long as we modified the technology enough to make it legally distinct, it was acceptable business practice. Pembroke was on his feet. Objection. Hearsay. Your Honor, Ms. Ramos is testifying about statements made by her supervisors in the course of business. It's an exception to hearsay. Judge Morales nodded. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Ramos. The concern wasn't whether Ms. Bennett had invented the technology first, Ramos continued. It was whether we could claim enough ownership to sue her if she became too successful. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morales gavelled for silence. Ryan pressed forward. So the lawsuit against Ms. Bennett wasn't about protecting Garrison's intellectual property. It was about eliminating a competitor. Objection, leading, sustained. Ryan rephrased. In your professional opinion, what was the purpose of filing those patents and pursuing this lawsuit? Ramos met his eyes. To bankrupt Sophia Bennett before her technology could threaten Garrison's market share. The words landed like a bomb. Pembroke's cross-examination was brutal, but Ramos held firm. She had documentation, emails, meeting notes, records of conversations where Garrison executives explicitly discussed using legal action as a competitive weapon. By the time Ramos stepped down, the narrative had shifted. This wasn't a case about theft anymore. It was a case about power, about a corporation weaponizing the legal system to crush innovation they couldn't match. Judge Morales called the attorneys to the bench. Mr. Pembroke, I'm going to give you a chance to reconsider your position. The evidence presented today raises serious questions about your client's claims. Pembroke's expression was stone. Your Honor, we maintain our position. Ms. Ramos is a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. Then this case will proceed to trial. But I'm warning you, if the evidence supports Ms. Bennett's version of events, Garrison Global will face significant consequences. Ryan returned to the defense table. Sophia grabbed his arm. Did we just win? No, Ryan said quietly. but we just stopped losing. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, which sounded like plenty of time until Ryan actually started counting the hours. Between his courthouse job, taking care of Claire, and building a case against one of the most powerful corporations in the country, 6 weeks felt like 6 minutes. The media frenzy intensified after Julia Ramos's testimony. Cable news ran segments dissecting what had happened in that courtroom. Legal analysts who'd called Ryan a joke 2 weeks earlier were suddenly hedging their predictions. A few even admitted that maybe the single dad in work boots had a legitimate shot. But Garrison Global wasn't backing down. If anything, they doubled their efforts. 3 days after the preliminary hearing, Pembroke filed a motion to exclude Julia Ramos's testimony from the actual trial, arguing she was biased and unreliable. Ryan spent an entire weekend drafting a response, citing case law and arguing that Ramos's insider knowledge was exactly the kind of evidence the court needed to hear. Judge Morales denied Pembroke's motion, but it cost Ryan 40 hours he didn't have. Then Garrison's legal team started flooding the defense with discovery requests. Thousands of documents, interrogatories, depositions scheduled with barely any notice. It was a standard intimidation tactic: bury the opposition in paperwork until they made mistakes or gave up entirely. Ryan refused to give them the satisfaction. He worked through lunch breaks at the courthouse, typing responses on his phone while fixing broken plumbing. He stayed up until 3 or 4 in the morning reviewing files, surviving on coffee and whatever leftovers Claire hadn't finished at dinner. Emily helped as much as she could, but she was one person and Garrison had an army. The strain started showing everywhere. Ryan's coworkers at the courthouse noticed he looked exhausted. His supervisor pulled him aside one afternoon and asked if everything was okay at home. "I'm fine," Ryan lied. "Just dealing with some stuff." "You need time off?" "Can't afford it." His supervisor frowned but didn't push. Ryan appreciated that. The last thing he needed was people asking questions he didn't want to answer. Claire noticed too, though she tried to hide it. She started making her own breakfast in the mornings, packing her own lunch, doing her homework without being asked. She was 9 years old and already carrying weight that shouldn't be hers to carry. One night, Ryan came home after a particularly brutal deposition prep session to find Claire sitting at the kitchen table, struggling through math problems. It was almost 10 o'clock. She should have been asleep hours ago.
"Kiddo, why are you still up?" Claire looked up, eyes tired. "I couldn't figure out these problems, and you weren't here to help, so I just kept trying."
Ryan felt something crack inside his chest. He sat down next to her and looked at the worksheet. Fractions. She'd gotten most of them wrong, not because she didn't understand, but because she was exhausted and trying to do it alone. "I'm sorry," Ryan said quietly. "I should have been here." "It's okay. You're working on important stuff. You're important too. More important than any case." Claire shrugged, trying to act like it didn't matter. "I know, Dad. It's fine." But it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. Ryan helped her finish the homework, then sat with her while she fell asleep on the couch, too tired to make it upstairs. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and then went back downstairs to keep working because that's what the case demanded. That's what survival demanded. He hated it. He hated that he was choosing between being a good father and being a good lawyer. He hated that there wasn't enough of him to be both. But he kept going because stopping wasn't an option. The depositions started in the 3rd week. Garrison's attorneys deposed Sophia first, grilling her for 8 hours straight about every detail of her research, her funding, her business practices. They were looking for inconsistencies, contradictions, anything they could use to paint her as dishonest. Ryan sat beside her the entire time, objecting when necessary, but mostly just watching Sophia hold her ground. She was impressive under pressure, precise, composed, refusing to be rattled even when Pembroke's associates tried to twist her words. But Ryan could see the toll it took. When they finally finished for the day, Sophia looked hollowed out. "How'd I do?" she asked in the parking lot, her voice flat. "You did great." "I don't feel great. I feel like I just got torn apart." That's what they wanted, but you didn't give them anything. Sophia leaned against her car, staring at nothing. "I keep thinking about what happens if we lose. My company's already hemorrhaging money fighting this. Legal fees, lost contracts, investors pulling out because they don't want to touch anything associated with the lawsuit. Even if we win, I might not survive." Ryan didn't have an answer for that. It was the brutal truth of cases like this. Even victory could be Pyrrhic. Then we make sure winning is worth it, Ryan said finally. We don't just beat them. We expose them. Sophia looked at him. You really think we can? I think we have to try. Ryan's deposition came 2 days later. He knew it was going to be bad, but knowing didn't prepare him for the reality. Pembroke conducted the deposition himself, which told Ryan everything he needed to know about how seriously Garrison was taking him now. They'd stopped treating him like a joke. Now he was a threat that needed to be neutralized. Mr. Carter, Pembroke began, his voice smooth as glass, you've been practicing law for approximately 8 years. Is that correct? I was licensed 8 years ago. I practiced actively for 2 years, then took a 6-year hiatus. A hiatus? Interesting word choice. Most people would call abandoning your career something else. Ryan kept his expression neutral. I chose to focus on my family. That's not abandonment. And during those 6 years, did you keep up with changes in patent law, corporate litigation, legal precedent? I read when I could. When you could, between fixing toilets and repairing furniture. Objection, Emily said sharply. Argumentative. Pembroke smiled. Withdrawn. Mr. Carter, how many patent infringement cases did you handle during your 2 years of active practice? None. None. And yet you're now representing a defendant in a complex patent case worth $300 million. I'm a fast learner. Or dangerously overconfident. Pembroke leaned forward. Mr. Carter, isn't it true that you're using Ms. Bennett's case as a way to resurrect a career you weren't good enough to maintain? No. Isn't it true that you have no business taking on a case of this magnitude? I don't believe that's true. But you can't be certain. You have no recent experience, no expertise in this specific area of law, and no track record to speak of. How can you possibly believe you're serving your client's best interests? Ryan met Pembroke's eyes. Because I'm the only person who was willing to fight for her when everyone else walked away. But Pembroke's smile sharpened. How noble. Tell me, Mr. Carter, what are you charging Miss Bennett for your services? I'm working pro bono. Pro bono. So you're not being paid at all. That's correct. And you're supporting yourself and your daughter on a courthouse janitor's salary while working a case that requires 60, 70 hours a week. How sustainable is that? As sustainable as it needs to be, Xiaowong. Or unsustainable enough that you'll be forced to withdraw before trial, leaving Ms. Bennett worse off than if she'd found competent counsel from the start. Emily objected again, but the damage was done. Pembroke was planting seeds of doubt, not just for the court, but for Sophia, making her wonder if trusting Ryan had been the biggest mistake of her life. The deposition lasted 6 hours. By the end, Ryan felt like he'd been through a psychological meat grinder. Every vulnerability exposed, every weakness highlighted, every decision questioned. Emily drove him home because he was too exhausted to be trusted behind the wheel. That was brutal, Emily said quietly. Yeah, but you didn't break. I came close. Close doesn't count. You held the line, Ryan. That's what matters. Ryan wanted to believe her, but doubt was easier to hold on to than confidence. When he got home, Claire was already asleep. Mrs. Chen had made dinner, lasagna, sitting covered on the stove with a note that said, "Eat something." Ryan heated up a plate, managed 3 bites, and then gave up. He wasn't hungry, he was just tired. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall, wondering if Pembroke was right, wondering if he was in over his head, wondering if his pride was going to cost Sophia everything. His phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. Emily told me about the deposition. Are you okay? Ryan typed back. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Ryan almost smiled. Okay. I'm not fine, but I'll be ready for trial. That's not what I'm worried about. Then what are you worried about? There was a long pause before Sophia's response came through. That you're sacrificing too much for this. That I'm asking too much of you. Ryan stared at the message. Then he called her instead of texting back. Sophia answered immediately. Hi. I'm not sacrificing anything I'm not willing to give, Ryan said. And you're not asking for anything you don't deserve. Ryan, I mean it. This case matters. Not because of the money or the headlines or any of that. It matters because what Garrison is doing to you is wrong. And if we don't stop them,
They'll do it to someone else. That's worth fighting for. Sophia was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about your daughter, about how much time this is taking away from her.
Claire understands. She's growing up watching her father stand up for something that matters. That's worth more than a few missed bedtime stories. You really believe that? I have to. They talked for another 20 minutes, not about the case, but about smaller things. Sophia told him about her team at the company, the engineers and scientists who were still working despite everything, still believing in what they'd built. Ryan told her about Claire's latest obsession with marine biology, how she wanted to be a dolphin trainer when she grew up. She sounds amazing, Sophia said. She is. Scares the hell out of me sometimes how smart she is. She gets that from you. She gets it from her mother. There was a pause. Then Sophia said, Tell me about her, if you want to. Ryan hadn't talked about Sarah in a long time. Not really. People asked occasionally, but he always deflected, gave the shortest answer he could, moved on. It was easier than actually dealing with the grief. But tonight, sitting in his kitchen at almost midnight, exhausted and raw and uncertain about everything except the fact that he was too tired to keep his walls up, Ryan found himself talking. Her name was Sarah. We met in law school. She was brilliant, top of our class, editor of the law review, the kind of person everyone assumed would end up on the Supreme Court someday. We got married right after graduation, had Claire 3 years later. Everything was good, better than good. I thought we had forever. Bus. What happened? Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Sarah was coming home from a work event. She died before the ambulance got there. Ryan's voice was steady, mechanical. He'd said these words before. They didn't hurt less, but he'd learned to say them without falling apart. Claire was 3. She doesn't remember her mom very well. Sometimes she asks me questions, and I tell her stories, but I don't know if they're enough. I'm so sorry. I walked away from law because I couldn't do both. Couldn't be the kind of lawyer Sarah had been and the kind of father Claire needed. So I chose Claire. I've never regretted that choice, but sometimes I wonder if Sarah would be disappointed that I gave it all up. Ryan, she wouldn't be disappointed. She'd be proud that you put your daughter first. Maybe, or maybe she'd tell me I was capable of more than fixing broken furniture. You are capable of more. You're proving that right now. Ryan rubbed his eyes. I should let you go. It's late. Yeah, try to get some sleep. You too. Ryan? Yeah? Thank you for everything. The line went dead. Ryan sat in the silence of his kitchen, phone still in his hand, and realized that at some point over the past few weeks, this case had stopped being just about winning or losing. It had become personal in a way he hadn't expected. He cared about Sophia, not just as a client, but as a person who was fighting like hell to protect something she'd built against people who wanted to tear it down. He respected that. He respected her. And maybe, somewhere in the back of his mind, he recognized that fighting for Sophia was also a way of fighting for the part of himself he'd buried 6 years ago. The part that believed law could be a tool for justice instead of just a business. The weeks blurred together after that. Deposition after deposition, motion after motion, discovery request after discovery request. Garrison was relentless, and Ryan matched them hour for hour, filing after filing. Emily was a lifesaver. She took on more than she should have, working late into the night, surviving on determination and spite. She said once, over terrible courthouse coffee, Pembroke fired me from his firm 3 years ago because I questioned a billing practice. Watching you tear him apart in court is going to be the highlight of my career. Ryan laughed, which felt strange. He hadn't laughed much lately. Sophia threw herself into preparing her company for whatever came next. She documented every piece of evidence, organized her engineers to testify, prepared financial records showing her company's legitimacy. She also started contingency planning for if they lost, which assets could be sold, which contracts could be salvaged, how to keep at least some version of her mission alive. Ryan hated that she had to think about that, but he understood it. Hope was important, but survival required planning for the worst. The trial was 3 weeks away when Garrison made their next move. Ryan was at the courthouse, replacing a broken window latch in one of the judge's chambers, when Pembroke appeared in the hallway. Mr. Carter, a moment? Ryan set down his tools and followed Pembroke to an empty conference room. He knew this wasn't a social visit. Pembroke closed the door and got straight to the point. My client is prepared to make a final settlement offer. $5 million, no admission of wrongdoing, and Ms. Bennett keeps her company but agrees not to compete in North American markets for 5 years. That's not a settlement. That's a gag order with a check attached. It's a generous offer considering she's going to lose at trial. You don't know that. Mr. Carter, let's be realistic. You've put up a decent fight for someone in your position, but you're outmatched. My team has resources, expertise, and experience you simply don't have. When this goes to trial, we will systematically dismantle your case, discredit your witnesses, and convince a jury that your client is guilty. And then Ms. Bennett will lose everything. Take the settlement. Let her walk away with something. Ryan felt the old familiar anger rising. You know she's innocent. You know Garrison stole from her, not the other way around. I know my client has a strong case and the ability to win it. Your client has money and lawyers. That's not the same as being right. Pembroke's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, both of you. This ends badly for everyone if you insist on going to trial. Then I guess we'll see you in court. Ryan left the conference room before Pembroke could respond. He found Sophia in the courthouse lobby an hour later and told her about the offer. $5 million, Sophia said slowly. That would cover my legal fees and then some. It would also mean giving up North America, 5 years out of the market, and your competitors will own the space. You'd be starting over from scratch. I know. Sophia looked out the courthouse windows at the street beyond. Part of me wants to take it, just to end this nightmare and move on. And the other part? The other part wants to fight until there's nothing left to fight with. Because if I don't, Garrison wins. And people like them always win when everyone else is too tired or too scared to keep going. Ryan waited. This was her decision, not his. Sophia turned to face him. We go to trial, we fight. Whatever happens, at least we'll know we didn't back down. You're sure? No, but I'm committed. Ryan nodded. Then let's finish this. They spent the next 3 weeks preparing like their lives depended on it. Because in a way, they did. Sophia's company, Ryan's return to law, everything they'd worked for came down to what happened in that courtroom. Ryan rehearsed his opening statement dozens of times, refining it, sharpening it, making every word count. Emily organized exhibits, prepared witness binders, anticipated every possible objection Garrison might raise. Sophia worked with her engineers to create clear, compelling demonstrations of how her technology worked and why it was different from anything Garrison had developed. They brought in expert witnesses, patent attorneys, chemical engineers, industry analysts, all willing to testify that Sophia's work was original and groundbreaking. Ryan prepped each one, making sure their testimony would be clear, credible, and devastating to Garrison's case. Claire helped in her own way, making snack runs and reminding everyone to eat actual food. She'd started calling Emily Aunt M, which made Emily tear up the first time she heard it. She'd also started asking more questions about the case, not because she fully understood it, but because she could tell it mattered to her dad. Are you going to win? Claire asked one night while Ryan was reviewing jury instructions. I don't know, kiddo. But you're trying really hard. As hard as I can, Sat. Then that's all you can do. Ryan looked at his daughter, 9 years old and wiser than she had any right to be. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't notice because you're usually tired. Ryan laughed and pulled her into a hug. Fair point. The weekend before trial, Ryan took Claire to the park. Not to work, not to prep, just to spend time with her. They fed ducks, played on the swings, got ice cream even though it was barely 60 degrees outside. This is nice, Claire said, chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin. We should do this more. We will. After the trial's over, I promise. You always say that. I know, and I mean it every time. Claire gave him a look that was far too skeptical for a 9-year-old. Dad, I know you're working really hard, and I know it's important, but you're allowed to take breaks too. Since when did you become my life coach? Since someone had to. Ryan couldn't argue with that. Sunday night, the night before the trial started, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. What if the jury didn't believe Julia Ramos? What if Garrison's experts were more convincing? What if he made a mistake, missed a detail, failed Sophia when she needed him most? The doubt was suffocating. Around 2 in the morning, Ryan gave up on sleep and went downstairs. He made coffee, opened his laptop, and reviewed his opening statement one more time. His phone lit up. Text from Emily. Can't sleep either? No, we're going to be okay. You know that, right? I wish I had your confidence. You don't need confidence. You just need to show up and fight. That's all we've been doing this whole time. Ryan smiled despite himself. Thanks, Em.
Get some sleep. Or don't. But either way, we've got this. Ryan wanted to believe her. And maybe, somewhere beneath the fear and exhaustion and doubt, he did.
Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a cold wind that felt appropriate for the day ahead. Ryan dropped Claire at school, hugged her tighter than usual, and drove to the courthouse. The media presence had tripled since the preliminary hearing. News vans lined the entire block. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, cameras ready, waiting for someone to interview. Ryan avoided them, slipping in through the employee entrance. Sophia and Emily were already in the courtroom when he arrived. Sophia wore a navy suit, her hair pulled back, looking every bit the professional CEO she was. Emily had her laptop open, exhibits organized, ready for war. Morning, Ryan said, setting his briefcase down. Morning, Sophia replied. Her voice was steady, but Ryan could see the fear in her eyes. You okay? Terrified. Good. That means you care. Across the aisle, Garrison's legal team was setting up. 4 attorneys, stacks of materials, the air of people who'd done this 100 times and expected to win. Ryan took a breath and reminded himself that this was just another courtroom, just another case, just another fight. Except it wasn't. It was everything. At 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the courtroom to order. Judge Morales entered, took her seat, and looked out at the packed gallery. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to begin the trial of Bennett Water Technologies versus Garrison Global Industries. This is a civil case regarding allegations of patent infringement and theft of intellectual property. Both sides will have the opportunity to present their evidence, and the jury will determine the outcome. She gestured to the jury box, where 12 people sat looking various degrees of interested, bored, and uncomfortable. They were ordinary people, a teacher, a nurse, a retired postal worker, a freelance graphic designer, people with jobs and families and lives that had been put on hold so they could decide the fate of 2 companies they'd never heard of until a few weeks ago. Judge Morales looked at Pembroke. Counsel for the plaintiff, your opening statement. Pembroke rose, buttoned his jacket, and approached the jury with the ease of someone who'd been born to this. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service. What we have here is a straightforward case. The defendant, Ms. Bennett, stole technology that belongs to my client, Garrison Global. She copied our research, rebranded it, and profited from it. The evidence will show this beyond any doubt. We will present patents, expert testimony, and forensic analysis that proves Ms. Bennett's guilt. At the end of this trial, we will ask you to hold her accountable. Thank you. He sat down. Efficient, cold, confident. Judge Morales turned to Ryan. Counsel for the defense, your opening statement. Ryan stood, every eye in the courtroom on him, and walked to the jury box. This was it. Everything came down to this. He looked at the 12 people who would decide Sophia's fate, took a breath, and began. My client didn't steal anything, Ryan said, his voice carrying across the courtroom. She invented something, and that invention scared Garrison Global so badly that they decided to destroy her rather than compete with her. He paused, letting the words settle over the jury. He paused, letting the... You're going to hear a lot of technical testimony over the next few days. Patents, chemical compositions, filtration rates. It's going to be complicated, and that's intentional. Garrison Global wants you confused because confusion helps them. But underneath all that complexity is a simple truth. Sophia Bennett published her research publicly before Garrison filed their patents. She shared her work with the scientific community, with the world, because she believed innovation should help people, not just make profits. And Garrison Global studied that research, copied it, and then sued her for using her own invention. Ryan moved closer to the jury box, making eye contact with as many jurors as he could. They're not here to protect their intellectual property. They're here to eliminate competition. And if they win, what message does that send? That corporations with enough money and enough lawyers can crush anyone who threatens their market share, no matter how innocent that person is. That's not justice. That's just power. And I'm asking you, at the end of this trial, to prove that power doesn't always win. Ryan returned to his seat. It wasn't the most eloquent opening statement ever delivered, but it was honest. That had to count for something. Judge Morales gestured to Pembroke. Call your first witness. The plaintiff calls Dr. Martin Ashford. Ashford took the stand again, looking even more polished than he had at the preliminary hearing. Pembroke walked him through his credentials, his expertise, his analysis of Sophia's technology. It was methodical, precise, designed to overwhelm the jury with technical superiority. Dr. Ashford, in your expert opinion, could Ms. Bennett have developed this technology independently? It's theoretically possible, but extremely unlikely. The specific combination of materials, the exact pore size of the ceramic membrane, the flow rate optimization, all of these match Garrison's patents too closely to be coincidental. And what does that suggest to you? That Ms. Bennett had access to our proprietary research and used it as the foundation for her own work. Pembroke nodded gravely. No further questions. Ryan stood for cross-examination, and this time he wasn't nervous. He was angry. Dr. Ashford, you testified that Ms. Bennett's technology matches Garrison's patents too closely to be coincidental. But you're aware that Ms. Bennett published her research 9 months before Garrison filed those patents, correct? I'm aware of the publication dates, yes. It says, so if the technologies are identical and Ms. Bennett published first, wouldn't it be more accurate to say that Garrison's patents match her research too closely to be coincidental? Ashford shifted uncomfortably. The patents reflect internal development work that predates the filing. Do you have documentation proving that internal development? Oh, the documentation is proprietary. So you're asking the jury to trust you without evidence. Okay. I'm stating what I know based on my position at Garrison. Ryan picked up a document from the defense table. Dr. Ashford, this is an email you sent to Garrison's legal department in October 2020. Would you read the highlighted portion for the jury? Ashford took the paper reluctantly. His face tightened as he read. I attended Bennett's presentation at the water conference. Her ceramic filtration methodology is significantly more efficient than our current systems. Recommend we study her approach for potential applications. You recommended that Garrison study Ms. Bennett's approach. Not that you'd already developed something similar, that you study her approach. That's not... You wrote those words, Dr. Ashford. Yes or no? Wallace. Yes, but... And 3 months later, Garrison filed patents based on the exact methodology you recommended they study from Ms. Bennett's work. Pembroke stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Carter. Ryan turned back to Ashford. Dr. Ashford, did Garrison develop their ceramic filtration technology before or after you attended Miss Bennett's presentation? Ashford's jaw worked. Our research was ongoing. That's not what I asked. Before or after? The patents were filed after. Because Garrison didn't have this technology until they studied Ms. Bennett's public research. Isn't that true? Well, that's an oversimplification. It's a yes or no question, Doctor. No, it's not true. Ryan let the lie hang in the air for a moment. Then he said, no further questions. Garrison spent the next 2 days parading expert witnesses through the courtroom. Engineers, patent attorneys, forensic analysts, all of them testifying to the same narrative. Sophia Bennett had stolen technology that belonged to Garrison Global. Ryan cross-examined each one, chipping away at their credibility, exposing inconsistencies, forcing them to admit they had no actual proof of independent development before Garrison studied Sophia's work. It was exhausting, brutal work, but Ryan could feel the momentum shifting. The jury was paying attention now. A few of them were taking notes, which was a good sign. Others looked skeptical when Garrison's witnesses couldn't provide straight answers. On the third day, Pembroke called a witness Ryan hadn't expected, David Garrison himself, CEO of Garrison Global Industries. Garrison was in his late 50s, silver-haired and commanding, the kind of man who walked into rooms and expected everyone to defer to him. He took the stand with the confidence of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything in his life. Pembroke treated him like royalty. Mr. Garrison, can you explain to the jury why your company filed this lawsuit? Sorry. We filed because Ms. Bennett stole our intellectual property. Innovation requires investment, research, time. When someone takes that work and profits from it, we have an obligation to our shareholders and our employees to protect what we've built. And how has Ms. Bennett's alleged theft affected Garrison Global? It's cost us market share, contracts, revenue. We invested millions developing this technology, and she's using it to undercut our prices and damage our reputation. Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Pembroke sat down, satisfied. He'd given the jury the image he wanted, a legitimate corporation defending itself against a thief. Judge Morales looked at Ryan. Cross-examination? Ryan stood and approached the witness stand. Garrison watched him with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Garrison, you testified that Ms. Bennett stole your intellectual property. When exactly did you first become aware of her water purification system? I believe it was early 2021 when our legal team flagged it as a potential infringement. You believe? Or you know? I know, early 2021. Ryan pulled out a document. This is an internal memo from your strategy division dated September 2020. It's addressed to you. Would you read the subject line for the jury? Garrison took the paper, his expression unchanging. Competitive Threat Assessment, Bennett Water Technologies. September 2020. 5 months before your legal team supposedly flagged Ms. Bennett's work. So you knew about her technology earlier than you just testified. The memo discusses competitive analysis. That's standard business practice. Standard business practice to track a competitor whose technology you were about to copy? Pembroke shot to his feet. Objection. Sustained. Mr. Carter, stick to questions. Ryan didn't back down. Mr. Garrison, this memo includes a detailed analysis of Ms. Bennett's ceramic filtration methodology. It describes her system as, and I quote, revolutionary in its efficiency and cost-effectiveness. Did you read this memo? I receive dozens of memos every week. I can't recall everyone. This one recommended that Garrison either acquire Ms. Bennett's company or develop comparable technology to neutralize the competitive threat. Do you recall that recommendation? Garrison's face tightened. Vaguely. And which option did you choose, acquisition or development? We attempted acquisition. Ms. Bennett declined. Well, so after she refused to sell her company to you, you decided to file patents on her technology and sue her instead. We filed patents on our own technology. Technology that didn't exist until after you studied her work. That's your interpretation. Right. Ryan pulled out another document. Mr. Garrison, this is an email from you to your Chief Technology Officer dated November 2020. Would you read the highlighted section? Yes, Garrison took the paper, and for the first time Ryan saw something flicker in his expression. Uncertainty. Bennett's filtration method is exactly what we need. Fast-track development of a comparable system and get patents filed by Q1. We can't let her dominate this market. The courtroom went dead silent. The courtroom went dead. Ryan let the words sink in. Then he said, very quietly, "You didn't invent this technology, Mr. Garrison. You stole it. And when Miss Bennett refused to let you buy her out, you weaponized the legal system to destroy her. That's a lie. Is it? Because your own emails tell a different story." Garrison's face flushed with anger. "You don't understand how business works. Bennett had a good idea, but she didn't have the resources to scale it. We could have taken her technology global, helped millions of people. Instead, she refused to work with us out of pride." Out of pride? Or because she knew you'd bury her innovation behind patents and profit margins? We're a business, not a charity. And Ms. Bennett is an inventor, not a thief. Yet, here we are. Ryan returned to his seat. He could feel the energy in the courtroom shift. The jury wasn't just paying attention now. They were engaged, leaning forward, watching Garrison like they were seeing him for the first time. Pembroke tried to rehabilitate his witness on redirect, but the damage was done. David Garrison had admitted, in his own words, that he'd targeted Sophia's technology because it threatened his business. That wasn't protection of intellectual property. That was corporate warfare. The prosecution rested their case late Thursday afternoon. Judge Morales adjourned for the day, and Ryan, Sophia, and Emily retreated to their conference room. "That was incredible," Emily said, practically vibrating with excitement. "You destroyed him." "I exposed him," Ryan corrected. "Whether that's enough depends on the jury." Sophia was quiet, staring at the table. Ryan sat down across from her. "You okay?" "I
don't know. Hearing him say those things, that he tried to buy me out, that he sees my work as something to acquire or destroy, it makes me feel sick. That's who he is. That's who we're fighting. I know. I spent years building something that matters, something that could actually help people. And to him, it's just a market threat." Ryan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "To the jury, it's more than that. They heard him. They know what this is really about." Sophia looked at him, and for a moment Ryan saw something raw in her expression. Fear, hope, exhaustion, all tangled together. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in this, for believing in me. You made it easy." They worked late into the night preparing for the defense's case. Ryan would call Sophia first, let her tell her story in her own words. Then Julia Ramos, to reinforce the narrative that Garrison had deliberately targeted Sophia. Then a parade of experts, engineers who'd reviewed the technology, patent attorneys who'd analyzed the filings, industry analysts who could speak to Garrison's history of crushing competitors. It was a strong case, but strong didn't guarantee victory. Ryan drove home around midnight, utterly drained. Claire was asleep and Mrs. Chen was dozing on the couch, the TV playing quietly. Ryan thanked her, paid her, and sent her home. He checked on Claire, pulled her blanket up over her shoulders, and then collapsed into bed without even changing clothes. Friday morning, the defense began presenting their case. Sophia took the stand first, and Ryan walked her through her story methodically. Her background, her education, the moment she realized traditional water purification systems were failing the communities that needed them most. "I spent 3 years developing this technology," Sophia said, her voice steady. "I publish my research openly because I believe transparency would encourage collaboration, innovation. I never imagined someone would use that openness as a weapon against me." "When did you first learn that Garrison Global had filed patents based on your research?" "March 2021. Their legal team sent me a cease and desist letter claiming I was infringing on their intellectual property. I was shocked. The technology was mine. I'd published it months earlier." What did you do?" "I hired a lawyer and tried to fight it, but Garrison kept escalating. More legal threats, more demands. Eventually, they filed this lawsuit, and I realized they weren't interested in the truth. They just wanted me gone." Pembroke's cross-examination was vicious. He attacked Sophia's credibility, her business practices, her motivations. He suggested she'd fabricated the timeline, manipulated documents, lied about her research. But Sophia didn't break. She answered every question calmly, refused to be baited, and when Pembroke tried to twist her words, she corrected him with precision. "Mr. Pembroke, I didn't steal anything. I invented something. And if Garrison Global had been interested in collaboration instead of domination, we wouldn't be here." "Cool?" Ryan called Julia Ramos next. Her testimony was even more damning than it had been at the preliminary hearing. She walked the jury through Garrison's internal strategy, the emails discussing how to neutralize Sophia as a competitor, the deliberate decision to file patents after studying her work. "They didn't care about innovation," Ramos said. "They cared about market control. And when Sophia refused to play along, they decided to destroy her." Pembroke tried to discredit her as a disgruntled former employee, but Ramos had documentation, emails, meeting notes, records that corroborated every claim she made. Over the next 2 days, Ryan called expert after expert, a patent attorney who testified that Garrison's patents were derivative of Sophia's published research, an engineer who demonstrated the differences between generic ceramic filtration and Sophia's specific innovations, an industry analyst who explained Garrison's pattern of acquiring or eliminating competitors who threatened their dominance. It was a relentless assault on Garrison's narrative. By Monday afternoon, when the defense rested, Ryan felt like they'd made their case as strongly as possible.
But the jury's faces were unreadable, and that scared him. Closing arguments were scheduled for Tuesday morning. Ryan spent Monday night at his kitchen table, writing and rewriting his closing statement, trying to find the words that would convince 12 strangers that justice mattered more than corporate power. Claire came downstairs around 10, unable to sleep. "Big day tomorrow?" she asked. "The biggest." "You nervous?" "Terrified." Claire climbed into the chair next to him and looked at his notes. "What are you going to say?" "I'm going to tell them the truth. That Sophia Bennett invented something important, and Garrison Global tried to steal it. That's good. Truth is important." Ryan smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You're just too busy to notice." "Fair point." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dad, even if you don't win, I'm proud of you." Ryan felt something crack in his chest. "Thanks, kiddo. That means everything." "But you should probably win." "Just saying." Ryan laughed despite himself. "I'll do my best." Tuesday morning arrived with clear skies and cold air. The courtroom was packed to capacity, reporters lining the back rows, spectators filling every available seat. The jury looked tired but alert, ready for this to be over. Judge Morales called the court to order. "Counsel, are you ready to proceed with closing arguments?" Pembroke stood. "We are, Your Honor." "Then you may proceed, Mr. Pembroke." Pembroke approached the jury box with his trademark confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case has been complicated by a lot of noise. Emotional appeals, conspiracy theories, attempts to paint my client as a villain. But strip away the noise, and the facts are simple. The defendant used technology that belongs to Garrison Global. We have patents proving ownership. We have expert testimony confirming the similarities. We have forensic evidence showing infringement. Ms. Bennett may have a compelling story, but stories don't change facts. We ask you to follow the evidence and find for the plaintiff. Thank you." Sir, he sat down. It was efficient, clinical. The closing argument of someone who believed facts and power were the same thing. Judge Morales turned to Ryan. "Mr. Carter, your closing argument." Ryan stood, walked to the jury box, and looked at the 12 people who would decide everything. "Mr. Pembroke is right about one thing," Ryan began. "This case is about facts, but the facts don't support his story. They support Ms. Bennett's." He pointed to the timeline displayed on the courtroom screen. June 2020, Sophia Bennett publishes her research on ceramic membrane filtration. September 2020, David Garrison's team sends him a memo identifying her technology as a competitive threat. November 2020, Garrison emails his executives instructing them to fast-track development of a comparable system. March 2021, Garrison files patents. May 2021, they sue Sophia Bennett for using her own invention. Ryan moved closer to the jury. Those are the facts, not theories, not noise, facts. And those facts tell a story about a corporation that saw innovation as a threat and decided to weaponize the legal system to eliminate it. He paused, making eye contact with each juror. Garrison Global wants you to believe this is about protecting intellectual property, but it's not. It's about protecting market share. It's about crushing a competitor they couldn't beat through innovation. And if you let them win, what message does that send? That money and power matter more than truth? That corporations can steal from inventors and then sue them for fighting back? Ryan's voice grew stronger. Sophia Bennett didn't steal anything. She invented something that could change lives, save lives. She shared it with the world because she believed innovation should serve people, not profits. And for that, Garrison Global is trying to destroy her. He looked at the jury, searching their faces for any sign of what they were thinking. "I'm not asking you to punish Garrison Global. I'm asking you to tell the truth. That Sophia Bennett is innocent. That justice matters more than power. That 12 ordinary people can stand up to a corporate giant and say, no, not this time, not on our watch." Ryan returned to his seat. His heart was pounding. He'd given everything he had. Now it was out of his hands. Judge Morales instructed the jury on the law, explaining the burden of proof, the standards they needed to apply. Then she sent them to deliberate. The waiting was torture. Ryan, Sophia, and Emily sat in the conference room, unable to focus on anything. Minutes crawled by like hours. Ryan checked his phone obsessively, even though he knew the court would notify them when the jury reached a verdict. "How long do you think they'll be out?" Sophia asked. "Could be hours. Could be days. What does it mean if they come back quickly?" "Could mean anything. Fast verdicts can go either way." Emily paced the room. "I can't just sit here. I need to do something." "There's nothing to do," Ryan said. "We made our case. Now we wait." But waiting felt impossible. Ryan kept replaying the trial in his mind, questioning every decision, every cross-examination, every word of his closing argument. Had he done enough? Had he made the case clearly enough? Had the jury believed him? 2 hours passed. Then 3. Around 1 o'clock, Ryan's phone buzzed. Court notification. Jury has reached a verdict. Reconvene at 2 p.m. Ryan's stomach dropped. They have a verdict. Sophia went pale. Emily stopped pacing. 3 hours, Emily said. Is that good or bad? I don't know. They returned to the courtroom at 1:45. The gallery was already full, reporters ready, cameras positioned. Sophia sat at the defense table, hands folded, face unreadable. Ryan sat beside her, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. At 2 o'clock, the bailiff brought the jury back in. They filed into the jury box, faces serious, giving nothing away. Judge Morales addressed them. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The jury foreperson, a middle-aged woman who'd been taking notes throughout the trial, stood. We have, Your Honor. Please hand the verdict form to the bailiff. The bailiff took the paper and delivered it to Judge Morales. She reviewed it, her expression neutral, and then handed it back to the bailiff to return to the foreperson. The defendant will rise. Ryan and Sophia stood. Ryan could feel Sophia trembling beside him. Judge Morales looked at the foreperson. On the charge of patent infringement, how do you find? The foreperson looked directly at Sophia. We find the defendant, Sophia Bennett, not guilty. The courtroom exploded. Reporters rushed for the doors. Spectators erupted in conversation. Sophia collapsed into her chair, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. Judge Morales gavelled for order. On the charge of theft of trade secrets, how do you find? Not guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of unfair competition? Not guilty. Judge Morales turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service. You are dismissed. She looked at Garrison's legal team. Mr. Pembroke, your client's claims are denied. Furthermore, given the evidence presented during this trial, I am ordering Garrison Global Industries to pay all of Ms. Bennett's legal fees and court costs. This case is closed. The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom. Ryan stood there, stunned. They'd won. Not just won, they'd destroyed Garrison's case so thoroughly that the judge had ordered them to pay for everything. Sophia turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and threw her arms around him. We did it. We actually did it. Ryan hugged her back, feeling 6 weeks of tension finally break. You did it? You fought like hell, and you won. Emily joined the embrace, all 3 of them clinging to each other in the middle of the courtroom while chaos swirled around them. Across the aisle, Harold Pembroke was gathering his materials, his face carved from stone. David Garrison had already left, unwilling to face the defeat. Reporters swarmed the defense table, shouting questions, but Ryan waved them off. No comment, not today. He needed to get out of there, needed air, needed space to process what had just happened. They made it to the hallway, and Sophia finally let herself break down completely, not from sadness, but from relief so overwhelming it hurt. I can't believe it's over, she said through tears. I can't believe we won. Believe it, Emily said. You're free. Your company's safe. Everything you built, it's yours. Sophia looked at Ryan. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You trusted me when no one else would. That's more than enough. Also, that's all right. They stood in that hallway for a long time, letting the reality sink in. The nightmare was over. Sophia could rebuild, expand, keep bringing clean water to communities that needed it. Emily could hold her head high knowing she'd been part of something that mattered. And Ryan. Ryan had remembered who he used to be and proven he could be that person again. His phone rang. Claire's school. Mr. Carter? This is Principal Morrison. Claire's in my office. She's not in trouble, but she insisted I call you. Something about a trial? Ryan smiled. Tell her we won. There was a pause. Then he heard Claire's voice in the background, whooping with joy. She's very excited, Principal Morrison said dryly. She'd like to know if she can tell her class. She can tell whoever she wants. Ryan hung up and looked at Sophia and Emily. I need to pick up my daughter. Go, Sophia said. We'll celebrate later. Tonight, dinner, all of us. You, Claire, Emily. My treat. Deal. Ryan left the courthouse through the front doors this time, walking past the cameras, the reporters, the crowds. He didn't stop to answer questions or give interviews. He just walked to his truck, got in, and drove to Claire's school. She was waiting outside the principal's office, practically bouncing with excitement. When she saw Ryan, she ran to him and jumped into his arms. You won! We won, Ryan corrected. Team effort. I knew you would. I told everyone you would. Ryan laughed and carried her out to the truck. They drove home in comfortable silence, Claire chattering about her day, Ryan letting the tension of the past 6 weeks finally drain away. That night, they met Sophia and Emily at a small Italian restaurant Claire had picked out. They ate too much pasta, laughed too loud, and toasted to victory with sparkling cider because Claire insisted on being included in every toast. To Sophia, Emily said, raising her glass, for refusing to give up. To Emily, Sophia countered, for being the best paralegal in the history of paralegals. To Ryan, Claire added, for being the best dad and the best lawyer. So, Ryan clinked glasses with his daughter. To all of us, for proving that sometimes the impossible is just hard, not actually impossible. They drank, and for the first time in weeks, Ryan felt something close to peace. The case was over. Sophia was safe. Claire was proud of him. And maybe, just maybe, Ryan had found a way back to the person he'd thought he'd lost forever. The morning after the verdict, Ryan woke up to his alarm and reached to turn it off before remembering he didn't have to rush anymore. The trial was over. The case was won. For the first time in 6 weeks, he could just lie there and breathe. Claire was already awake, making noise in the kitchen. Ryan found her attempting to make pancakes, flour everywhere, batter dripping down the side of the bowl. What are you doing? Celebrating. You won, so I'm making victory pancakes. Ryan surveyed the disaster zone that used to be his kitchen. These look more like disaster pancakes. They're the same thing. They ate burned pancakes together, laughing about nothing in particular, and Ryan realized how much he'd missed this. Just being present, not distracted by case files or depositions or the weight of someone else's entire future sitting on his shoulders. His phone started buzzing around 8. News outlets requesting interviews, law firms offering positions, a literary agent asking if he'd be interested in writing a book about the case. Ryan ignored most of it, but one call caught his attention. Sophia. Good morning, Ryan answered. Morning, how are you feeling? Exhausted, relieved, still processing. Same. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon? Sure, what's this about? I'll explain when you get here. 2 o'clock? I'll be there. Ryan spent the morning catching up on everything he'd neglected during the trial. Laundry, grocery shopping, bills that were almost overdue. The mundane tasks of ordinary life felt strange after weeks of courtroom battles and corporate warfare. At 1:30, he dropped Claire at Mrs. Chen's house and drove to Bennett Water Technologies. The company occupied a modest building in an industrial park south of downtown. Nothing fancy, but functional. The kind of place built by someone who cared more about the work than appearances. Sophia met him in the lobby, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in months. She led him upstairs to her office, a cluttered space filled with technical diagrams, water quality reports, and photos of communities her systems had helped. Coffee? She offered. Always. She poured 2 cups and sat across from him. I've been thinking about what comes next. For the company, for me, and I keep coming back to something you said during the trial. What's that? Merci. That innovation should serve people, not just profits. I built this company on that principle, but the lawsuit made me forget it. I got so focused on survival that I lost sight of the mission.
Ryan sipped his coffee, waiting. I want to expand, Sophia continued. Take this technology to more communities, more countries. But I also want to make sure I'm doing it right. That means having someone on my team who understands both the legal landscape and the ethical implications of what we're building. You want to hire a general counsel. I want to hire you. Ryan set his coffee down. Sophia, say us. Hear me out. You'd be the legal advisor for Bennett Water Technologies. Full-time position, competitive salary, benefits. You'd help us navigate patent law, contract negotiations, regulatory compliance. But more than that, you'd be the person making sure we stay true to what we're supposed to be. A company that helps people, not one that becomes what Garrison Global is. Ryan was quiet. It was a generous offer. More than generous. It was a lifeline to the career he'd walked away from 6 years ago. What about Claire, he asked. Flexible hours. Remote work when you need it. You could pick her up from school every day if you wanted. I'm not asking you to sacrifice being a father. I'm asking you to do both. I don't know if that's possible. Why not? You've been doing both for 6 weeks. You raised a kid and won a case that half the legal community said was unwinnable. If you can do that, you can do this. Ryan looked at the photos on her wall. Children drinking clean water, families rebuilding communities, lives changed by technology that worked because someone refused to give up on making it work. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need, but Ryan, you belong in this field. You're good at it, and more importantly, you care about it. That matters. Ryan drove home in a daze, Sophia's offer circling his mind. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately. The work was meaningful, the pay would solve a lot of problems, and he'd be using his skills for something that actually mattered. But another part of him remembered the 60-hour weeks at his old firm, the constant pressure, the way law had consumed everything until there was nothing left for Claire or for himself. He'd walked away from that world for a reason. Was he ready to walk back into it, even in a different form? That evening, after dinner, Claire asked him what was wrong. Nothing's wrong, kiddo. You've been quiet all night. That means something's wrong. Ryan smiled. She read him too well. I got a job offer today, from Sophia. That's good, right? It is. It's a really good offer, but I'm not sure if I should take it. Why not? Because it means going back to being a lawyer full-time, and I'm worried that means less time with you. Claire was quiet for a moment, thinking it through with the seriousness she brought to everything. Dad, you were happy during the trial, I could tell. Even when you were tired and stressed, you were happy. I was also barely around. But you were around when it mattered. You still helped me with homework. You still made me breakfast. You still showed up. She looked at him with those eyes that were too old for 9. You can do both. You're good at both. When did you get so smart? I told you, I've always been smart. You just don't listen. Ryan laughed and pulled her into a hug. What would I do without you? Probably make bad decisions. The next morning, Ryan called Sophia and accepted the position. She insisted he take a week off before starting to decompress and spend time with Claire, and Ryan didn't argue. They spent that week doing things they hadn't done in months. Movies, parks, the aquarium Claire had been asking to visit. Ryan taught her how to fish at a lake outside the city, neither of them catching anything but not caring. They ordered pizza and stayed up late watching nature documentaries, Claire narrating dolphin behavior like she was already a marine biologist. It was ordinary, simple, perfect. Emily stopped by halfway through the week with takeout and news. I got an offer from a nonprofit, she said, setting containers on Ryan's kitchen table. Legal aid for small businesses, helping people fight corporations who try to crush them. Apparently, someone saw my work on the Bennett case and thought I'd be good at it. That's amazing, Ryan said. It pays half what corporate firms pay, but I don't care. After watching what we did to Garrison, I realized I'd rather spend my career helping people like Sophia than helping people like Pembroke. You're going to be incredible at it. Damn right I am. Emily grinned. We make a good team, Ryan. If you ever need help on a case, call me. I'm serious. I will. Promise. Ryan's first official day at Bennett Water Technologies was low-key, which he appreciated.
Sophia introduced him to the team, engineers, scientists, operations staff, all of them people who'd survived the lawsuit and kept working because they believed in the mission. "This is Ryan Carter," Sophia said. "He's our new general counsel, and he's the reason we're all still here. If you need legal advice, contract review, or someone to tell you why your idea might get us sued, talk to Ryan." One of the engineers, a woman named Dr. Patel, raised her hand. "Can we finally launch in South America without worrying about patent trolls?" "That's exactly what I'm here to figure out," Ryan said. The work was challenging in ways he'd forgotten he enjoyed. Reviewing international contracts, navigating regulatory frameworks, advising on intellectual property strategy. But unlike his old firm, where every case was about maximizing profit, this work had purpose. Every contract Ryan reviewed meant another community would get access to clean water. Every patent he protected meant Sophia's technology would reach people who needed it. He settled into a rhythm over the following months. Work from 7 to 3, pick up Claire from school, evenings at home, occasional late nights when something urgent came up. It wasn't perfect. Some weeks were harder than others. Some deadlines too tight, some problems too complex. But it was sustainable. And more importantly, it was meaningful. Claire started asking questions about what he did, genuinely curious. Ryan explained contracts and patents in terms she could understand, and she absorbed it all with that quick mind of hers. "So you make sure bad companies don't steal from good companies?" "Basically, yeah. That's cool. You're like a lawyer superhero." "I don't know about superhero." "Fine. Lawyer Batman." "He doesn't have superpowers either, but he still gets stuff done." Ryan laughed. "I'll take it." 6 months after the trial, Sophia called Ryan into her office with news. "We just closed a contract with an international aid organization. They're deploying our systems in 12 countries across Africa and Southeast Asia. This is the biggest deal we've ever had." "That's incredible. It wouldn't have happened without you. The contract negotiations were brutal, and you navigated them perfectly." Sophia paused. "I wanted to ask you something. There's a site installation happening in Kenya next month. Community of about 3,000 people who've been drinking contaminated water for decades. I'm going to oversee the installation personally, and I'd like you to come. See what we're actually building here." Upam mas potishin. Ryan thought about it. 10 days in Kenya. He'd need to arrange care for Claire, coordinate work remotely, figure out logistics. A year ago, he would have said it was impossible. "I'll talk to Claire," Ryan said. "If she's okay with it, I'm in." That night, Ryan explained the trip to Claire over dinner. She listened carefully, asked questions about Kenya, about the communities they'd be helping, about what would happen to the water after the system was installed. "You should go," she said finally. "You sure? It's almost 2 weeks." "Dad, you're helping people get clean water. That's important. I'll be fine with Mrs. Chen." "When did you become so mature?" "I've always been mature. You just ignore it." Ryan laughed and messed up her hair, which she pretended to hate but secretly loved. Kenya was everything Sophia had promised, and more. The community was a rural village about 2 hours outside Nairobi, dusty and hot and alive with people who'd been waiting years for a reliable water source. Sophia's team spent a week installing the purification system, teaching locals how to maintain it, ensuring it would work long after they left. Ryan watched children line up to drink clean water for the first time in their lives. He saw mothers crying with relief that they wouldn't have to worry about their kids getting sick anymore. He met village elders who talked about what this meant for their future. Fewer illnesses, more time for education, the possibility of growth beyond mere survival. On the last night, Ryan and Sophia sat outside the village center, watching the sunset over the savannah. "This is what it's all about," Sophia said quietly. "Not the patents or the profits or the courtroom battles. This, people getting what they need to live. It's worth fighting for," Ryan agreed. "You know what I realized during the trial? I'd started to lose sight of this. I was so focused on protecting the company that I forgot why the company mattered. You reminded me. When you stood up in that courtroom and said, 'I'd invented something important,' you weren't talking about the business. You were talking about the impact. That's what brought me back." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "I spent 6 years convinced I'd failed, that walking away from law made me less than I could have been. But watching what you've built, seeing how it actually helps people, I realized I wasn't wrong to walk away. I was just waiting to find the right reason to come back." "And have you?" Found the right reason?
Yeah, I have.
They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to dark, and Ryan felt something settle inside him. Peace, maybe, or just the knowledge that he was exactly where he needed to be. When Ryan returned home, Claire was waiting at the airport with Mrs. Chen, holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Lawyer Batman." Ryan laughed so hard he almost cried, and Claire looked immensely pleased with herself. "How was it?" she asked in the car.
Amazing. Life-changing. I took about 1,000 photos to show you. Did you bring me something? A carved elephant from a local artist. And stories. Lots of stories.
Claire settled back in her seat, satisfied. Good trip, then. The best. Life continued its steady rhythm. Ryan worked cases that mattered, protected innovations that helped people, and found ways to use his legal skills for something beyond billable hours. He took on a few pro bono cases on the side, helping small businesses fight patent trolls and corporate bullies, building a reputation as the lawyer who'd taken down Garrison Global. Claire grew older, wiser, more independent. She started middle school and joined the debate team, which Ryan found both hilarious and terrifying because she was devastatingly good at arguing. She still wanted to be a marine biologist, but now she also talked about environmental law, about protecting oceans through policy and litigation. You're basically following in your dad's footsteps. Ryan said one night. No, I'm improving on them. You save companies. I'm going to save ecosystems. Fair point. Sophia's company continued expanding, bringing clean water to more communities, partnering with governments and NGOs, proving that ethical business wasn't just possible, but profitable. She offered Ryan a partnership stake in the company after the second year, making him not just an employee, but part owner. You've earned this, she said when Ryan tried to argue he hadn't done enough to deserve it. You saved this company. Now help me build it into something even bigger. Ryan accepted, and for the first time since Sarah died, he felt like his life had direction beyond just surviving day to day. Emily stayed in touch, occasionally pulling Ryan into cases where her nonprofit clients needed additional legal firepower. They made a good team still, complementing each other's strengths, fighting battles that mattered. One afternoon, almost 2 years after the trial, Ryan was in his office at Bennett Water Technologies when his phone rang. Unknown number, but something made him answer. Mr. Carter, this is Judge Patricia Morales. Ryan sat up straight. Your Honor, how can I help you? Bye-bye. I'm calling because I've been asked to recommend attorneys for a judicial mentorship program. We're looking for lawyers willing to mentor recent law school graduates who want to practice public interest law. Your name came up. My name? You took on a case that everyone said was impossible and won it. More importantly, you did it for the right reasons. That's exactly the kind of attorney we want mentoring the next generation. Ryan thought about it, about all the hours Emily and Sophia had invested in him, all the support that had made his victory possible, about paying that forward. I'd be honored, Your Honor. Excellent. I'll have my clerk send you the details. Ryan hung up and sat there, staring at nothing, amazed at how far he'd come from the courthouse janitor who'd fixed broken furniture and hidden from his past. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was building something. Not just a career, but a life that mattered, a legacy that would outlast him. That evening, Ryan took Claire out for dinner at the Italian place that had become their victory restaurant. They ordered too much food, told bad jokes, and talked about everything and nothing. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about Mom? Ryan set down his fork. They didn't talk about Sarah often, but when they did, Ryan tried to be honest. Every day. Sometimes it's just a memory. Something she said, something she would have found funny. Sometimes it's bigger, wondering what she'd think of the choices I've made. Do you think she'd be proud of you? Of us? Ryan looked at his daughter. This incredible person who'd grown up without a mother, but somehow turned out amazing anyway. Yeah, kiddo. I think she'd be proud. I think she'd look at you and see everything good in the world. And I think she'd tell me I did okay, even when I thought I was failing. You didn't fail, Dad. You're kind of great, actually. Only kind of. Well, you still can't cook without burning things. Ryan laughed. Fair point. They finished dinner and drove home through the city, past the courthouse where it had all started, past the neighborhoods where Ryan had struggled to keep everything together, through the life they'd built despite everything trying to tear it apart. When they got home, Claire went upstairs to do homework, and Ryan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking at the photos from Kenya still tacked to the bulletin board. Children drinking clean water, families gathering around the new system, faces full of hope and possibility. This was what mattered. Not winning cases or building careers, but making things better for people who needed it. Using whatever skills you had to leave the world a little less broken than you found it. Ryan thought about the courthouse janitor he'd been 2 years ago. The guy who'd convinced himself that hiding from his potential was the same as being responsible. The father who'd believed sacrifice meant giving up everything instead of finding balance. He'd been wrong about a lot of things, but he'd also been right about the one thing that mattered most. Claire came first, always. Everything else, the career, the victory, the purpose, had grown from that foundation. Because being a good father didn't mean abandoning everything else. It meant showing your kid that fighting for what's right is worth the cost, that standing up matters, that you can survive impossible odds if you're stubborn enough and care enough and refuse to quit. Ryan's phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. New contract just came through. Village in Guatemala, population 5,000, water crisis for 8 years. We're installing next month. You in? Ryan smiled and typed back. I'm in. He looked up at the ceiling, toward Claire's room, where she was probably reading ahead in her science textbook because regular homework was too easy. Sarah, he said quietly, I think we did okay. I think our kid's going to be just fine. The house was quiet. The night was peaceful. And Ryan Carter, former janitor turned lawyer, turned general counsel, turned father, who finally figured out he could be more than one thing at once, sat in his kitchen and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not perfect. Not finished. But whole. Because sometimes the people everyone overlooks turn out to be the ones who change everything. Not because they're special or chosen or better than anyone else, but because they refuse to accept that broken is permanent, because they fight even when the odds are impossible, because they believe that one person with the courage to stand up can inspire others to do the same. Ryan had stood up in that courtroom because someone needed help, and he was the only one offering. He hadn't known if he'd win, hadn't known if he was good enough or prepared enough or strong enough. But he'd tried, and sometimes trying is enough. Not because it guarantees victory, but because it proves that defeat isn't inevitable, that power can be challenged, that justice isn't just for people with money and lawyers and unlimited resources. It's for anyone brave enough to demand it. Ryan finished his coffee, washed the cup, and turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow he'd go to work, protect innovations that saved lives, mentor young lawyers trying to make a difference, and pick up his daughter from school like he did every day. It was an ordinary life built from extraordinary choices, a career reclaimed from ruins, a family held together by stubbornness and love. And somewhere in the world, in a village Ryan had never heard of, people were drinking clean water because Sophia Bennett had refused to give up, and Ryan Carter had remembered who he used to be. That was legacy enough. That was everything.